Hi there, welcome, and thanks so much for using my affiliate link for ProWritingAid. I hope you enjoy using ProWritingAid and love it as much as I do. I'm going to discuss your bonus overused words cheat sheet handout, a resource included inside my upcoming online course, Book Editing Blueprint, a step-by-step plan to making your novels publishable. First, we'll dive into the categories of overused words. Then I'll demonstrate my personal system for finding and weeding out these types of overused words on a manuscript. And finally, I'll show you how to use ProWritingAid to put the finishing touches on your word choice. The first category is what I like to call boring words. This includes the bland words that most writers fall back on, such as eyes, frown, gaze, grin, glance, grab, laugh, look, move, nod, pull, push, reach, shook as in shook his head, shrug, sigh, sit, smile, stand, stare, took, turn, and walk. It can also include words such as pulse, breath, inhale, exhale, heart, and chest, as many writers fall back on these when describing body language and a character's emotions. Feel, felt, see, saw, hear, and heard are often overused as well. You don't have to cut every instance of these words. They're unavoidable, and you'll see them in pretty much every novel that you read. The problem is that when you depend on these crutch words too much, as most authors tend to do, it hurts your book. If characters are grinning, walking, shrugging, turning to look at something, rolling their eyes, having their hearts pound and pulse race, or gazing at somebody on every page, those overused words have a cumulative effect. If you're always telling how the characters saw, heard, or felt something, that means you might not be showing things vividly. Your book will lack an original voice, and you risk losing readers. The next category is passive words. These include is, are, was, were, has, had, and be. Watch out for sentences that start with there was, there were, there is, there are, as those are a big tip-off. Just like with the boring words, though, I'm not telling you to weed out every passive word from your book. That's impossible. You can't write a novel without these words. But many authors could drastically improve their books by writing more actively. The third category is vague and flabby words that aren't missed when they're cut. This includes words like beautiful, just, no, quite, some, still, that, then, very, and a slew of others. We also want to make sure we're not overdoing adverbs that end in ly, such as totally, basically, slowly, quickly, and quietly. Again, some adverbs are fine, but everything in moderation. You need to be aware of how many are on one page to make sure you're not relying on them too much. Another category is prepositions such as above, at, by, down, for, in, inside, or to. While prepositions are essential to crafting sentences, they're also pesky little critters that breed wordiness. Sometimes you need them and sometimes you don't. You want to watch for rambling sentences with too many prepositions. Your job is to find places where the revision sounds better than the original. So the overused words cheat sheet contains the most common overused words in these categories. I recommend doing your editing in sections and starting with the bigger things first, like theme, character, structure, and point of view, and tweaking your overused words later in the editing process. You can certainly watch for these words and revise them as you're doing the bigger edits, but once you get to the line editing stage, it's time to really focus on them so you can punch up your word choice and tighten your sentences. I recommend starting with the find function and searching for some of these words. Since I have ProWritingAid, I don't run searches for every preposition, adverb, or passive word on the list, as the ProWritingAid reports can help with that a great deal. But I do like to focus on doing individual searches for a couple of categories. I always use the find function to run searches for words like look, glance, sigh, shrug, walk, smile, grin, heart, pulse, turn, push, and pull. Make sure you're also looking for variations of these words. For example, if you type look, looked and looking will also come up because look is part of those words. But if you take gaze and gazing, those spellings are too different, so you'd have to run separate searches to see those variations. I also run searches for phrases like started to, began to, and proceeded to. If you're using Google Docs, you just go up to Edit, Find and Replace, and then your Find box pops up. You type the word you're searching for, and it will highlight them all. You can either scroll down to see all the highlights or use the Next button to go through them one by one. I'm going to do the demo in Microsoft Word. Some authors from the Shortcuts for Writers Facebook group have offered unedited earlier drafts of their manuscripts, so I'll do some searches and a bit of off-the-cuff line editing to show you examples of how to deal with overused words. Then we'll finish up with a demo of the ProWritingAid reports that focus on overused words. Okay, so now I am in Microsoft Word, and I'm using Word 2010, and we're going to open the Find box and do a few searches. So first, at least in this version of Word, we want to click on Home and make sure that the Home menu has been brought up. And then we're going to go over to the far right and click on Find, and that brings up our Find box or navigation box. I'm just going to X out of this previous search. And you can see that the box looks a little different than it does in Google Docs, but it works very similar. So I have my Overused Words cheat sheet in front of me, and there's a lot of words on it. As I indicated before, I don't do an individual search for every little word on it. For example, prepositions such as for. This document is only 13 pages, but there are 36 results here, and if this was a 350-page document, this would be very overwhelming, and many of the fours would be absolutely fine. The thing we want to watch out for with prepositions is that you don't have sticky sentences, just long, kind of rambling sentences, or they don't even have to be rambling, but just long sentences that could be tightened up and made sharper. So that's why a lot of these words are on that list, and ProWritingAid has some scans that helps to identify them so that you can tighten up those sentences. And you also want to pay attention to the end of sentences, the last word. Sometimes if a sentence ends on a preposition, it could be made stronger with a more powerful word. Some sentences are okay, especially in dialogue. It might sound more natural, but again, if these ProWritingAid scans helps to make these prepositions and smaller words more visible so that you can evaluate them and see where they are, how many are in the sentence, and whether there's anything you can do to just make it stronger. So we're just going to take a few of the bigger words off this list, and by bigger words I mean verbs, nouns, words that are related to emotions. So let's start with eyes. This tends to be a very overused word for many writers. And we can either scroll down, and this is helpful to see how many times it appears on a page, or we can use the arrows to click up and down, or just go up and down this way. And there's a few different ways you can view this information. I like clicking on the Results tab. So we'll just change a couple of these as an example. Okay, you can see it's used twice here. Let's just see what else we have. Again, it's used twice, very close to each other. Maybe we could just take that right out, or one thing I'm noticing just at first glance is that there are a lot of pronouns here, and I'm just making a mental note that I want to run a pronoun scan in ProWritingAid just to see at an easier glance how often the writer is overusing pronouns. I think some of these paragraphs are going to need more balance, and by more balance I mean more of a balance between pronouns and character names. But I like to just focus on one thing at a time. So I'm just, right now, all I'm worried about is eyes, and I'm just making a mental note of this for later. Here, her eyes scan the room. This is redundant because you do scan with your eyes already. So I'm just going to change it to she scanned the room. And again, there's a lot of prepositions here, so we need to come back to that later. But for now, that got rid of one of the eyes. And here's another, her eyes scan the room. Oops. Somehow my fonts changed for a second and then went back to normal, but okay, it appears to be fixed now. Okay, so let's do another scan. So now we are searching for a look, another very common word to overuse. filled with what looked to be hot chocolate, I would just say filled with hot chocolate. Tightens that up. I don't know if we really need her looking at him. They're having a conversation together, so it's probably understood that she's looking at him. So I just cut that one out. So basically what we're doing here is we're evaluating whether we want to keep the word as is, and sometimes that's fine. Again, you probably won't have a manuscript that never uses look. It's okay to use it sometimes, but you want to pay attention to how often you're using it. So the other options are to just cut it out and perhaps it won't even be missed, or to revise it with a stronger word, or you may even have to revise the whole sentence. Okay. Looked her up and down. Maybe we could say something like scrutinized her. Okay, so let's do a couple more words. Okay, now I'm working on a different manuscript and I did a search for smile. This is a 25-page sample and smile has been used 7 times, so that's not too bad, but if this pattern kept up over a 350-page manuscript, then that would be a lot of smiles. So we could probably cut down on some of these. So let's just take a quick glance here. Here's an easy one to just cut out because here Megan's laughing and then it's redundant to say that she's smiling. And here I'm just noticing that we have a smiled and a smiling. The smiling didn't come up because we did a search for SMILE and smiling doesn't have the E in it. So that's why it's very helpful to run searches for different variations of your overused words that are on this list. For example, smile and smiling, or gaze and gazing. So I would definitely change one of these. We could either cut out the smiling, or instead of the red face smiling up at her, we could just revise this a little bit and indicate that it has a cheerful face. And there's a couple of short sentences here. Stephanie shrugged and she smiled. I think we could just delete that one. If you wanted to indicate that she's cheerful or teasing, maybe we could just develop the sentence a little bit more. Here, if for example there were a lot of smiles on this page, we could change this to like a gap tooth grin. But grin tends to be an overused word also, so we would at some point want to do a search for grin just to make sure we're not creating another problem by replacing too many smiles with grins. Okay, let's do one more search. So I just typed shrug in the find box, and it's only been used 2 times, which isn't bad at all for a 25-page excerpt, but let's just see where they are in relation to one another. Well, and they are actually on 2 consecutive pages. If they were spread a lot further apart, then I wouldn't worry about this, but because they're on 2 consecutive pages, I just want to see if we can change one. And actually, the sentences are identical. Stephanie shrugged and Stephanie shrugged. So we definitely want to change one of those. And here I'm noticing that we have a tugged. So there's some unintentional rhyming with shrugged and tugged. So this would be a good one to change. We can just cut it right out. We could also search for adverbs that end in ly. If we type ly, that'll bring up some of our ly words. Some of them are words like family, which obviously isn't an adverb, so we just have to scroll through them and see which ones are relevant. Okay, here's a neatly wrapped box. I'm looking for a lot of adverbs on the same page. For example, here we have a few of them. So I would just delete currently. We really don't need that. We don't really need practically bouncing. Either she is or she isn't. So we could say Danielle was bouncing up and down. We could delete the really and just say she seems nice. Here we have two ly words in the same sentence. So just for rhythm purposes, we might want to cut one out. And some adverbs are certainly fine. I'm just looking for pages where there are a lot of adverbs, or for instances where perhaps like an adverb can be replaced with a stronger word choice. Okay, just ignore. I'll ignore these. Okay. Those look okay. Here's a few actually and outrightly, so maybe we could rework this to say she never outright told Megan. Definitely is used here and here, so maybe we would want to change one of those. So typing in ly just gives you an idea of where your adverbs are. It's going to bring up some non-relevant words also, but if you just scan through, then it makes the adverbs jump out. Okay, so now let's do some ProWritingAid scans and see how those tie into our overused words cheat sheet. So I just did our overused word scan. I went up to ProWritingAid. Again, I'm using Word. If you have ProWritingAid, you can also have the option of using it in Google Docs. This is what it looks like in Word. Then I went to Overused and it ran the scan, and these are our results. They're highlighted and there's more detail over here. So it's saying we may have overused the word have, and we may have overused just and then. And ing words. So let's look at then, since there's a few of them right here on the page that we're on. Let's see how there's 4 of them. So we could say something like, instead of then started on the next box, before starting on the next box. And put the containers away. And stepped away. Notice that then was marked in yellow and our ing words are red. So I like how it does it in different colors so that the different words or different issues can stand out. I'm not worried about have on this page. There's only a couple of them. We could delete this just, but I don't see any others around it, and it's in dialogue, so I'm going to let it go for now. Here we have a couple of haves next to each other. So if we wanted to, we could just change that to a contraction. Here's a just that I would cut because it really doesn't add anything. Danielle returned just as she was stirring the milk in. So I would just change it to Danielle returned as she was stirring the milk. And here's the instance of a sentence that ends in a preposition. I don't really think we need that. I think it's fine to say Danielle returned as she was stirring the milk. Or if you really wanted the in, you could say as she was stirring in the milk. This page has several words highlighted. So we have two justs. Maybe we cut this one and just keep that one. There's quite a few halves here, so maybe let's see. Maybe instead of using have here, we could change this to something like they would earn enough for a home deposit, or they would save enough for a home deposit by the end of the year. Just something a little more concrete. And here's our ing words. It's only 2, so I'm not worried about that. But if a page showed several near each other, then I would look at revising some of them. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what the overused word scan looks like. And you'll notice that some of those words are on our overused words cheat sheet. I'm just taking a quick look. Have, had, has is on there. And just and then are both on there. So this is a more efficient way of finding them and having those jump out at you than running an individual scan for each of those words. So you can kind of look at several at once and see how many of those words in general that you have on your page. So let's do another scan. So I cleared out the last scan. I deleted all the highlights by hitting clear and they all disappeared. And then I ran an echo scan. And I'm just pausing the video in between because sometimes it takes a couple minutes for the scan to load up. So echoes looks for repeated words that are used near each other. For example, here we can say care and care, of the table, the table, come and come, every and every. So you can see that this looks a little overwhelming, but it's not so bad if you just take it one paragraph at a time. Some of these might be fine, but you also might notice some unintentional repetitions. So let's just find a few that we can change. Like here, entire and entire. Maybe we could just delete this one. There we go. Here we have focus and focus. We could change this one to I can concentrate. I'm looking for a new job. So it's just those little tweaks. Very subtle, but they do improve the flow of your writing. Here's the bag of, and another and the bag of. We could just say she retrieved the bags of rubbish and food scraps. And that just tightens that up. So some of these are words that aren't on the overused words cheat sheet, obviously, but they're still overused in the sense that they're repeated very close together, and that throws off your rhythm. Okay, I'm going to pause this and we'll do another scan. I just ran a diction scan, and that looks at, just see, checks your writing for vague words, and many of these vague words are on the overused words cheat sheet, such as down, seam. So again, this allows you to just glance at the page and see how many of those types of words that you used on a page. I see a few instances of down here, so we probably would want to change a few of these. Instead of the plastic wheel seem to have a different idea, we could just revise that to had a different idea. It's a little tighter. Let's see. Maybe instead of run her down, we could change it to run her over, just because there's so many downs on this page. She dragged the red bin down to the curb. We could just delete that one. She dragged the red bin to the curb. And it tells you how many times you've used each word. And you can also use the arrows here and go through them one by one. I'm looking at like right now. And the arrows are just bringing me to those sections. So practically it was used twice. Actually it was used 3 times. Quite was used once. Beautiful was used 3 times. Here's a preposition that came up. We could definitely rework this sentence so that it's not ending on a preposition. We can change some of these beautifuls to maybe something like you have gorgeous hair. I'm looking at really. But I'm really hungry now. We could change that to I'm starving. Some and before. Both of those are on the overused words cheat sheet. We could delete this really. So on a page where there are a lot of them, you just want to cut some out and that'll tighten up your writing. We could delete that some. Here we have another sentence ending on a weaker sort of word, so we can rework it and also make it tighter by just saying Stephanie held the kitchen door open for Megan. Just look for one or two more to change. Here we have two offs, so I would probably change one of those. If she strode off, I'd like more detail on where she's striding off to. You could say she strode away, and just have a little bit more detail as to where she's going. Over to the lounge area. Oh, that's okay. We could take out a little and just say that doll should keep her busy for a while. The little doesn't really add anything. If you had a page that had a lot of seams on it, and some writers do have a tendency to overuse seam, we could rework the sentence to Lauren said with a forced laugh, or Lauren forced a laugh. So those are just the kinds of little tweaks that we can make after running this diction scan. Again, it looks overwhelming when you see all the highlights, but just because it's highlighted doesn't mean you have to change it. It's just calling your attention to the fact that you may have several vague words on one page. So just evaluate it, see if there's anything you can do that's an improvement, and if not, you can leave it as is. It's just more information for you, and having it pop out like this with these highlights just really makes it more obvious, so that you don't have to look for these words one by one. You can just look at several at a glance. Okay, so we will do a couple more scans. I'm just going to pause it and clear this out. I'll just show you how I hit clear and all the highlights disappear. This is the all repeat scan, and it's just going to look for phrases that you might have overused. For example, here on the other side, oops, was used a few times. We can just click through to see them. Here's one. Another. So we just want to make sure that they're not too close together. The heat was oppressive was used twice, so we definitely would want to change one of those, and that's kind of a passive sentence also. You must rest, dear was used a couple of times. Here's one. And another, so we probably want to change one of those. So this just draws your attention to some really subtle phrases that you might not have known that you overused. Shook and shook her head. Shook is on the overused words cheat sheet. Here's one, and you just would want to be aware of how often you're using that and how close they are to one another. And it breaks it down by the number of words in the phrases that you're overusing. 4-word phrases, 3-word phrases, and 2-word phrases, and even 1-word phrases. So there are 12 justs, and that's one of the words on our cheat sheet. And if you wanted, let's say this drew your attention to the fact that you had a lot of justs, and you've already gone through this and all these highlights are kind of stressing you out, you could clear it. And go back to home, find and run a scan for just. And then you could just focus on that one word. So that repeated word scan, what was it? Which one was it? It was all repeats. That can draw your attention to some of the words on the overused words cheat sheet that you didn't realize you were overusing, and then also lots of other overused phrases you might be using that aren't on the cheat sheet, but just your own personal overused phrases as you're writing this particular manuscript. And once you've gone through and kind of digested all that, you can just get rid of all the highlights and focus on one at a time. If you're seeing that you're using a lot of justs or sums or quites, then make a list of the words that are popping up for you a lot, and then you can just run finds for those. We could delete that one. We'll be all well if you get back into bed and rest. We delete that one. So just is a word that really isn't missed a lot of the time when you delete it. All right, I'm going to pause this and we will just finish up with some final scans. This was a pronoun scan on the manuscript that I had indicated earlier that needed more balance between pronouns and character names. You can see all the pronouns that are highlighted, and it also indicates that the use of pronouns is unusually high. So you would just want to replace some of these with the character's names. It looks like her name is Lydia. So we could just change some of them in the paragraph. And some authors have the opposite problem, where they overuse character's name and need to add more pronouns. So you just want to have that nice balance. Okay, and we will do one final scan. Our last scan is the sticky sentences report, and let me just read you the definition of a sticky sentence. These are sentences containing a high percentage of glue words. Glue words are the 200 or so most common words in English, and many of those glue words are the smaller words, such as the prepositions on the overused words cheat sheet. So we can just scroll down, and they're highlighted in purple. It could look overwhelming at first if you have a lot of them, but it's really not if you just tackle them one by one, because some of them may be absolutely fine. All this means is that you should reevaluate it and see if there's anything you can do to tighten it up while still making it sound natural. So let's just change a few as an example. For example, this is one that doesn't seem overly wordy to me, so I would just leave that alone. Wrung our hands together. I think that's a little redundant. We could just delete the together. As our eyes scan the room. We could just say she dropped to the bed for a moment, scanning the room. Instead of there was no way she would be able to drive, we could tighten that and say no way would she be able to drive if she still felt this way tomorrow? This can definitely be tightened. She scanned the room. For George, an ensuite bathroom, but only spotted the one on the other side of the room or something like that. Just tightens it up a bit. She really needs to find her way to her own room. We could just say she needed to find her room, freshen up, and get dressed. She walked to the opposite corner of the room and opened the door. Of the room is redundant. So we could just say she walked to the opposite corner and opened the door. So those are the kind of little tweaks we're making with these sticky sentences, just tightening them up. This one is highlighted, I guess, because it has a preposition in it, conjunction, but there's nothing wrong with that. So again, just because it's highlighted doesn't mean you need to change anything. But just reread it and make sure, especially the longer sentences. And here's one final one. Instead of there was a bathroom, which is very passive, say a bathroom let off in the reception area. That and was are both on the overused words cheat sheet. So that's why they're highlighted here. And that's why the sticky sentences report is a nice way of evaluating several of those words in one scan. You can just go through, and it lets you get a lot accomplished just with this one scan. Okay, I'm going to clear that. And I just wanted to draw your attention to this combo scan. You could combine your favorite reports into one report and do a scan looking for a few of these things at once, but I prefer doing it one at a time just so it's not too overwhelming. I really like focusing on one area at a time. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful and that this drew your attention to how you can find overused words in your manuscript and what kind of tweaks you can make to improve your word choice, that it helped you get a better understanding of line editing, and how ProWritingAid could really ties into the overused words cheat sheet and how you can combine finds and searches in Word and Google Docs with some ProWritingAid reports and really do a solid line edit on your manuscript and pump up your word choice and have some really tight sentences that flow nicely together. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found this helpful.